Welcome to our 7th session in our Trellis Seminar Series 2020, and welcome especially to our international visitors who possibly are joining us at a slightly less convenient time in the day today. So welcome all, whatever the time, wherever it is with you. For those of you who don't know us, Trellis is a charity that supports therapeutic gardening in Scotland. We provide information, training and good practice sharing, and we aim to promote the highest quality therapeutic gardening services and enable everyone to get the best out of them. Trellis also encourages gardening groups to share experience, skills and resources through a network of over 480 gardening groups. You can find links to all of our information and resources online on the Trellis homepage. So, a quick summary of today's session. Our presentation will last approximately 50-55 minutes, and this will be followed by an opportunity to ask questions and have discussion. Please use the chat feature throughout the session to ask questions, and we'll voice them to the presenters during the Q&A session, or you can use the reactions button, which you'll find down at the bottom of your screen, which you can raise your hand during the Q&A session and we'll invite you to speak directly to the presenters. Closed captions live audio transcription is available if you would like to use that feature. Again, it's down at the bottom of your screen. It'll say CC or three little buttons. Click on that and you'll see the subtitles narrative in there that you can select if you would like to see the subtitles. Feedback. Near the close of the session, we'll invite you to complete our survey through a link in the chat, and we ask you to do this as it is so important for us, as the detail does inform our work and it helps tailor what we can provide to you and also the information that is required by our funders. So now it's time to introduce our presenters. It's a real privilege to welcome our speakers today. Tara Graham-Cochrane, Dr. Amy Baker and Tanya Bearup, who are collectively delivering our speakers today. Tara Graham-Cochrane, who are collectively delivering their presentation on therapeutic horticulture and the healing benefits of nature from down under. First one, Tara is a founding member and president of the Therapeutic Horticulture Australia. Living in Adelaide, Tara is an international award-winning landscape architect and is a director of Designwell Landscape Architects, who specialise in the design of healing and therapeutic landscapes for the healthcare, aged care, disability and education sectors across Australia. Her passion is for enabling people to connect with nature through therapeutic horticulture. Next up we have, if I can spotlight, Amy. Dr. Amy Baker is a researcher and lecturer in the Occupational Therapy programme at the University of South Australia. A key area of Amy's research focuses on the connection between nature and well-being, having supervised or been involved in studies such as horticultural therapy in hospital settings, the meanings of community gardening and a visual analysis of nature play. Amy is a National Committee member of Therapeutic Horticulture Australia and convenes the Research Subcommittee. Amy is also a certified nature and forest bathing therapy guide, which sounds lovely to me. And in her spare time, Amy is an avid gardener and active member of several conservation groups in South Australia. And lastly, but by no means least, we have Tanya Bearup, who is a social worker and horticultural therapist, and is also a member of the Australian Association of Social Workers, and is on the National Committee of Therapeutic Horticulture Australia. She is the founder of My Garden Space, a social and therapeutic gardening service based in Melbourne, Australia. Tanya combines her professions and her 25 years of experience in aged care, disability, youth and family services to provide engaging and purposeful evidence-based counselling and therapeutic services utilising gardening and outdoor nature-based activities. Tanya's passion is gardening, creating nurturing green spaces and sharing the restorative benefits of nature. So, without any more chat from me, I am now going to pass you over to Tara, who will share her screen and lead on her presentation. Thank you so much, Tara.
No worries. Just sorry, a second. Let's go to the start. Here we go. All right, one moment. Beautiful. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
All right, lovely. Oh, hang on. Go back. Okay, so welcome. As I said, my name is Tara Graham-Cochrane and I'm the president of Therapeutic Horticulture Australia. And now today we're looking forward to sharing with you a snapshot of what is happening in the area of therapeutic horticulture in Australia. For those of you who haven't yet visited Australia, our country is vast and comprises of a very varied climate and diverse population. Embracing the diversity of cultures of our people is important to us, and especially the acknowledgement of our First Nation people. One of the many ways we do this is by beginning every presentation, meeting and gathering by acknowledging country. The word country is a term often used by Aboriginal people to describe the lands, waterways and seas to which they are connected. It contains complex ideas about law, place, custom, language, spiritual belief, cultural practice, material sustenance, family and identity. Here is our acknowledgement of country for today's seminar. For tens of thousands of years, people have been meeting in this nation and in country, holding ceremonies, telling stories and celebrating life. It is a wonderful reminder that we are all part of a story that is much larger than this moment. Yet equally, even though this moment is just a speck of time, it carries a huge amount of significance because it has connected us with the world in sharing knowledge and celebrating life through improved health and well-being for all. In honour of the rich history and ongoing traditions that are steeped in this land, Therapeutic Horticulture Australia celebrates the diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples and their continuing relationship to their unique cultural and spiritual connection to their lands, seas and waters. Therapeutic Horticulture Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians in this nation and pay our respects to their elders past and present, their ancestors in the Dreamtime and the descendants still caring for this land today. We would like to further extend our respect to all Aboriginal or Torres Strait Island people, our trellis friends and cultures wherever you may be joining us from across Australia and around the world. So today, my part of the presentation is to talk to you about therapeutic horticulture in Australia and the forming of our national professional therapeutic horticulture organisation, Therapeutic Horticulture Australia. To start, for those of you who aren't aware, therapeutic horticulture is a process in which plants and gardening activities are utilised to improve the body, mind and spirit of those people for all ages, backgrounds and abilities. Therapeutic horticultural techniques and processes are diverse and include any which use gardens and garden-based activities to promote physical, mental and social health, as well as the health of our planet. Therapeutic horticulture is practiced by many different people from many different disciplines and draws upon many different fields, such as aged care, disability, rehabilitation, occupational therapy, diversional and recreation therapy, landscape architecture, education, social and community services, urban planning and public green spaces, correctional services and mental health. So in Australia, the therapeutic horticulture profession has emerged from grassroots. To date, practitioners have created their own learning journeys, usually combining an allied health profession like nursing or one of the many types of therapies, or an education background with self-directed horticultural learning, or they've come from a horticulture profession and have learned about therapeutic horticulture generally online. Neither of which, as I'm sure you agree, are controlled professional pathways or enable standards of practice, something I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Nevertheless, therapeutic horticulture in Australia is booming. Therapeutic horticulture programs are emerging all across the country, and later Tanya will talk about how running a therapeutic horticulture program in Australia works. I'm going to take you through the types of therapeutic horticulture programs we currently see in Australia. Oh, my first one's still there. So country. As I mentioned earlier, understanding and celebrating Australia's Aboriginal culture is increasingly becoming more and more important. As a British colonial nation, we haven't been so great at this in the past. And now we are working at improving that. In this context, we now see therapeutic horticulture being used to educate Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people about the culture of our First Nations, where, as an example, the sharing of Indigenous plant knowledge can be a point of healing between cultures. We also see other programs being run with a focus on strengthening of Aboriginal people's connection with country. Australia is a place of many, many cultures. We are seeing predominantly in the community garden sector, many ways therapeutic horticulture programs are using the garden as a tool for the sharing of culture through planting and sharing of food, and programs that support new Australians and refugees through socialisation as they settle into new communities. Community gardens and urban farming have a big following in Australia, especially in areas where people are living in high density cities. Neighbours come together to grow and share food. Teaching children about health and nutrition of homegrown food has sparked off the school kitchen garden movement, with the majority of schools and preschools offering a version of this program. Nature play has also exploded in recent years, with more natural playgrounds being built all across Australia, which connect children with nature through exploration and adventure. Both of these settings have also enabled teachers and therapists to use nature as a tool for working with children on the autism spectrum, or who have learning difficulties, or who have a disability, or who just need extra support. Therapeutic horticulture in health, disability and ageing is also another area that is growing. Many programs are run across Australia that use the garden as a tool for therapy programs such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, diversional therapy and speech therapy, to name just a few. We're seeing that the aged care and disability sectors are the strongest users of therapeutic horticulture programs in healthcare settings, and hospitals are a space that are seriously dragging their feet. Supporting people in crisis is another area we're seeing therapeutic horticulture programs running. Programs for survivors of domestic violence, cancer, drug or alcohol abuse are often being run in community garden settings. Post-traumatic stress is also another area we are seeing moving into the therapeutic horticulture arena. Finally, therapeutic horticulture programs are being run in conjunction with horticulture employment programs to support predominantly people with a disability to gain employment. So another thing to understand is that Australia is huge, as you can see from our map here, with large distances between cities and towns. It also has such a varying climate. So what is grown, how it's grown is different all across the country. So how people can come together, the harshness and the individuality of the landscape, its extremes, fires, floods, smoke, rain, sun, are all challenges that we see therapeutic horticulture enabling people to overcome. Now I want to talk to you about how we have created a national professional therapeutic horticulture organisation to connect and regulate these many therapeutic horticulture programs. I know that some of you live in countries where therapeutic horticulture or horticultural therapy are recognised and accredited professions. But for the majority of the world, this is an area where we are just starting to go down that path. Now, 30 years ago, individual people working in health or horticulture in Australia started to question why couldn't they incorporate joining the two as a therapy for helping people. This started small isolated movements. Small isolated movements in Victoria, South Australia and New South Wales of like-minded people with the thought to seek others out and create networks. And as a result, there were 3 state groups that were formed. These were small, led by a few passionate people, and were groups that essentially held Share My Story events. In the late 2000s, the Victorian group started hosting an annual one-day conference which drew members from the other state groups together. This was the start of the Australia-wide connection. In 2015, a PhD was undertaken by Dr. Chris Reid, which recommended that therapeutic horticulture in Australia needed a national approach. The establishment of it required the establishment of professional qualifications, the development of professional standards of practice, and the formation of a representative organisation. During 2015 and 2016, this was discussed at length amongst the leaders of the state groups, and a first step in combining the states an annual National Therapeutic Horticulture Conference series was born. First held in Melbourne in 2016 and has since continued every year as one of the important ways our therapeutic horticulture community unites and shares its knowledge. At the same time as the National Conference series began, the 3 state groups were struggling to grow membership and to keep motivated leadership groups. It was decided that a national sustainable approach was required, and in 2017, a working party to form a national organisation was formed. And so Therapeutic Horticulture Australia was born. Since 2018, THA has been operating as a national association. We've developed a national leadership committee, which is supported by a number of subcommittees, each with their own focus. Everyone leading THA is a volunteer. Every year we run our annual conference, networking events, educational seminars and webinars, and are beginning to undertake research projects. All of these have moved to online in the last 2 years because of COVID, which has actually been a positive for THA, as it has enabled our therapeutic horticulture community spread across our vast country to connect in ways previously we didn't realise were possible. One of the challenges of Therapeutic Horticulture Australia has been the need to unite those that believe in the importance of developing a recognised therapeutic horticulture profession and education pathways, and those who have created their own pathways and are doing garden and health combinations in isolation without realising that therapeutic horticulture is actually a thing and that there are many others like them out there. As I mentioned before, THA is dealing with the sprouting of grassroots programs and the need to control the professionalism of therapeutic horticulture through the development of professional standards of practice. Strategically, the challenge we are facing is how do we do this? In 2020, we developed a strategic plan and associated action plan. This has given us a guiding light. We realise that it's going to be 10 plus years to achieve a nationally recognised course and therefore an award and job descriptions, but we're building momentum through building up memberships and the strength of our subcommittees as they work hard to achieve our action plan. Some of the challenges that we deal with every year are leadership burnout, because we are all volunteers, succession planning, hence the success of having a strategic plan means now that as we move forward, no matter what happens to any of us who are on the national committee or subcommittee, there's a vision that can continue on. Another challenge is admin and organisational support, which we made the important decision in 2020 to outsource. There's a need for marketing and business development expertise, which is also a challenge. And finally, the importance of maintaining momentum. Don't want to lose all the people who get passionate behind this cause. Some of the achievements that we've had, that, you know, therapeutic horticulture is gaining a voice and more people and organisations are realising that it exists. And so we are now seeing more investment in funding therapeutic horticulture programs to help people. We're delivering our strategic plan. Through the delivery of better quality events and networking, our momentum is building annually, which is fabulous. We have a strong growing membership and our social media following is exploding. We're focused on understanding how our therapeutic horticulture community in Australia is working so that THA can better represent them. And one of the ways that we've started doing this is by last year undertaking a research study into the state of therapeutic horticulture in Australia currently. I'm now going to hand over to Amy, who's going to tell you all about this study.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tara. I'm just going to share my screen. Oops. Apologies, hang on. Just one moment. Okay. Sorry about that. Hope everybody can see that okay. So hello everyone, and it's fantastic to be here online with you all today. I'm here to report on the findings of the national survey that THA undertook last year, as Tara has introduced. So my name is Amy Baker, and I'm the current convener of THA's research subcommittee. On the screen, you can see the team who contributed to this survey project, and I would especially like to acknowledge and thank Dr. Kate Neal, who up until recently was the convener of THA's research subcommittee and also vice president of THA. And Kate originally put these findings together in the form of this beautiful presentation last year, and I have tweaked that for the purposes of today's session. So in late 2020, the team called for interested members of our community to work together on mapping therapeutic horticulture activities in Australia. We know so much is happening in that space, but it had not been methodologically mapped at that point. So the purpose of the study was to explore therapeutic horticulture in Australia to gain a comprehensive understanding of current practices and research in the field, to understand the backgrounds, roles, interests, experiences and practices of those working in this field in Australia. And this was all to help inform the strategic direction of THA. And I should say at this point that this presentation is just a snapshot of the data. It's difficult to cover everything, but we are in the process of writing up the findings in greater detail. In total, we had 162 responses to this survey, and so we do need to be careful not to assume that all survey responses are representative of the field. We don't believe that we were exhaustive in terms of our sampling approaches. We of course hope that survey respondents are reflective of the field more broadly, but we can't be sure. As you can see on the screen, the majority of respondents identified as either female, which was approximately 2/3, or male, just under 1/3 of those respondents, with 7 people preferring not to say, and several people who identified as non-binary, and 1 person who identified as gender fluid. On this screen, you can see where respondents came from, and we really were asking people who were residing in Australia but although some of them may have also been delivering programs or working in the field overseas as well. So the spread, in terms of the spread, it's mostly people from the eastern part of Australia, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. In terms of professional background, about 20% worked in local, state or federal governments, and most of those respondents were from local councils. And we suspect this might have been skewed a little through the networks that the survey was disseminated through. Horticulture and health also featured heavily in terms of respondents' professional backgrounds. For educational background, most had qualifications in horticulture, landscape design and environmental sciences. Education, health and allied health also featured across a number of disciplines, as well as backgrounds in business, social work and aged care. We then asked who had formal qualifications in therapeutic horticulture in particular. We didn't qualify this question, so this is self-reported based on respondents' own perceptions of what a formal qualification is in this area. Of the 162 respondents, over 78% said they do not hold formal qualifications in therapeutic horticulture. This didn't surprise us, as we know that there is a lack of an accredited course in Australia. Of the 22% of people who did say that they held formal qualifications, when we asked people what these were, most referred to short courses, online learning, or therapeutic horticulture units that were offered either by registered training providers or non-registered training providers who would offer, for example, certificates of attainment or participation. We also asked about respondents' job title related to their role in therapeutic horticulture. Most were involved at the coalface as therapists, practitioners, program coordinators or volunteers, as well as some researchers and other roles in the field. In terms of funding, most respondents had their work funded through the government mainly, and this was mostly local councils again. There were also some respondents who were funded through not-for-profit organisations or philanthropic foundations, as well as a few other ways that you can see on the screen. The next thing we sought to understand were the contexts within which respondents worked. Most reported working in public landscapes and sites, and there was also a strong emphasis on community-based contexts, including care farming, community gardens, and social and community organisations, as well as education and health services. This led us to ask who respondents worked with. Many worked with the general population, which makes sense given the large number of respondents who said that they work in the context of public spaces. Respondents were able to tick as many options as were applicable, so this may have meant that some people ticked general population and adults 18 to 65 years, for example. And we also tended to see a double up where people say they work with a particular community, such as those living with a disability, and their carers and staff within that disability service. We asked respondents what they considered to be the intended benefits of the work they did in this space as well. This question included a list of fixed options that respondents could choose from, as well as an option for providing free text responses if there were other suggestions. On the screen, you can see the top 10 most frequently selected options from the fixed responses, with the most common being inclusion and participation, with 44% of respondents choosing that, passive enjoyment at 41%, mindfulness just under 40%, and we also saw confidence, social cohesion or teamwork, community development, and social skills development, all above 30% of respondents for each of these, followed by communication skills, motor skills development, sustainable development, and many more. In terms of the other reported benefits that were included as free text responses, in the map of words that you can see here, those presented in the bigger size refer to intended benefits that were more commonly mentioned. So we can see connection to nature, community building, education and well-being and wellness featured quite heavily, as well as exercise and physical activity, cognitive stimulation were also quite commonly cited. And the theme of community echoed in quite a few of these benefits as well. So the focus was certainly not just on the benefits to an individual, but also the importance of social connection and support. We also asked respondents what they call what they do. And I understand that this question was actually the impetus for the entire project, as Kate explained to me that a few academics sat around doing what academics love to do and argued over terminology and definitions. And considering the different fields, backgrounds, benefits and contexts in which respondents worked, it perhaps came as no surprise that there was little consensus here as well. So more respondents tended to use the term therapeutic horticulture when referring to their work. And for people who said therapeutic horticulture for their first choice of term used, horticultural therapy was their second choice and vice versa. We also noticed that therapeutic gardening or gardening therapy was the third most common option of phrasing used, followed by nature therapy, social horticulture, community gardening, and social or therapeutic horticulture. There were also some other terms used, such as therapeutic landscapes or therapeutic landscaping, and a range of other descriptions. So it was quite a mixed bag, and so this led us to explore a little bit more closely as to what people meant by some of these terms to try and help see whether this illuminated what people were doing a little bit better. So for those who called it therapeutic horticulture, this was defined typically as the sorts of descriptions that you see on the screen, and these were mostly in line with the sorts of definitions in the literature that you would expect to see for therapeutic horticulture. And for those who called it horticultural therapy, this was defined mostly in ways that, again, aligned quite well with the literature definitions, with, of course, a focus on therapy and goals. And often the idea of therapy in this context was seen as something holistic and something some people specifically noted as a type of therapy which did not rely solely on language, but rather a connection to nature. When we asked whether respondents applied particular theories or approaches to underpin their work, and from the options that people could select, and they could select as many as were relevant, the most commonly chosen were nature play, mindfulness and meditation, and biophilia. Not everyone indicated a theoretical approach or base, though, with 11% of respondents indicating that they did not use theory to guide their practice. We were also keen to see who was evaluating their work, and it became apparent that about half of the respondents were and half were not. For those who did evaluate their work, this was mostly through the use of feedback forms, observations, or informal conversations. So some people were using scales and instruments, whilst others took a more informal approach to evaluating the practice. For the half of the respondents who were not conducting evaluations, mostly this was because their work formed part of a larger program or initiative which was already being evaluated, or that it was not seen to be within the scope of the work that respondents were asked to do, or that there were seen to be difficulties in securing participants for evaluation purposes. Some respondents felt that there was no need to evaluate their own work, or noted that they were not funded to do evaluation, or that they planned to do it in the future, and some felt unsure or underqualified to conduct an evaluation. We also asked what were the main challenges of working in this field, which resulted in 4 key themes. A lack of recognition in the field, which related to both a lack of evidence or training or education. A lack of networking and mentoring in this area, as well as resources and practicalities such as to do with funding, time, personnel, difficulties evaluating the work, and COVID as well, and I'll touch on COVID in a moment. Other challenges included a lack of employment opportunities, job insecurity, and difficulty in scaling projects or programs. So I mentioned COVID in that last slide. For some people, COVID presented real barriers such as halts in funding, increased restrictions in being able to access spaces, working with vulnerable communities who needed to shelter more than others, so not having as much access to work with participants, and volunteers being asked to stop, which of course then had an impact on their ability to do the work. Some people did not experience change due to COVID, and this was typically because they were essential workers and their work was just able to continue in a COVID-safe way. And some people reported experiencing opportunities, such as increased interest in the benefits of time spent outdoors, because it felt like one of the safest places to be, along with more media coverage and further research opportunities. On the flip side of the challenges that were presented earlier, we also asked what would support respondents' work in therapeutic horticulture, with networking and opportunities to collaborate being most commonly described, followed by formal training or accreditation opportunities, funding opportunities for either program delivery or development, as well as evidence-based practitioner training and a centralised knowledge base to share resources within the field, amongst a whole other range of suggested supports. In terms of what we're doing next, as a research subcommittee from this initial sweep of the data, we're aiming to delve deeper into the survey data to provide more detailed findings in the form of an academic journal paper, industry paper, and website update. We will also be running a webinar on evaluation approaches in therapeutic horticulture in the middle of the year. And we are in the very early stages of planning a centralised knowledge base to share resources within this field. Both this webinar and that centralised repository of resources are areas that were noted in the survey as being priorities for further support. And I know that Tara is going to say a little bit more towards the end of our session about other initiatives that are underway within different areas of THA. So that brings me towards the end of this part of the presentation. Thank you, everyone. It has been a pleasure to share the findings from this study, and I'd like to say a big thanks to Trellis for the invitation for us to speak with you all today, and for everybody to join us. It's wonderful to see you all here. So I'm now going to pass over to Tanya, who will share her practice wisdom and experiences in providing therapeutic horticulture in Victoria.
Thank you. You're muted, Tanya.
Okay. Hello there.
Hello.
Okay, I'm just going to correct my view here. I think that's good. Now, is that good? You're all clear?
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you to Tara and Amy for those presentations. I felt when they were speaking, it kind of, in one way, was quite representative of my journey as a horticultural therapist in this space. And hopefully I can reflect some of that. The purpose of my presentation is to explain what it's been like practicing as a social worker in Australia, providing therapeutic horticulture, to give you some challenges that I've experienced, a key tip that I've picked up, and highlights of service provision. So basically, my background is in social work. Up until April 2020, I had been a social worker with 25 years of experience in a range of fields, including aged care and disability, youth and homelessness. I moved into children and family services. And my later work was working with a highly vulnerable group of people, dealing and assisting people with complex trauma backgrounds, significant mental health, substance and alcohol misuse, and family violence. This area of work was very challenging for me. I had a very therapeutic approach, so I often found myself feeling quite frustrated because we worked in a very reactive system that was often about putting out fires rather than doing some of that long-term therapeutic work. So the lockdown came in April 2020, one of the first of many extensive lockdowns in Melbourne. So we had lots of time as Melburnians to think about our career plans and life choices and things, and I made one of those. It enabled me to reflect on where I'm wanting to go practice-wise. Did I want to keep going the way that I was, or did I want to start focusing on my therapeutic skills? I also reflected on my own ongoing interest in gardening and time spent in nature, where I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but just the benefits of being in nature and its restorative benefits was really great for me. I had, as a child, as probably many here did too, read Frances Hodgson Burnett's book, The Secret Garden, and I think I'd long identified that in many ways it was it was an allegory of personal development. We saw Mary the orphan and Colin, the child with impaired mobility and some mental health needs, being supported by Dickon, the more boy with numerous skills and practice wisdom, helping these two reach healing and well-being by undertaking work in the secret garden. So I reflected on that, decided that, actually realised that what I had been doing for some time was actually going into people's gardens and gardening with them. I had been doing that. I did that with my grandma when I went and visited her out in England a while back. I realised that what that did for me was I was very energised by this, and I really enjoyed that process. And I also enjoyed just seeing the benefits that it had to people as well, the people that I was working with, the life that would come into their eyes and into just their basic presentation. I had a contemplation about, is there a way that I can actually combine my social work therapeutic skills with my love of gardening? And then as Tara explained, and I feel again this is something that other people have experienced in their own journeys, realising that there was such a thing as therapeutic horticulture. And very quickly following on the heels of that, there was a course being presented locally called An Introduction to Therapeutic Horticulture. And basically sitting under that teaching for the 7 weeks really helped me. It just really clicked for me. There was all the ways that I could make all the different experience I'd had in all these sectors and use that to the benefit of others by incorporating gardening as part of that process. And then I went on to study horticulture to get a qualification in that as well, to sort of really present myself as a horticultural therapist. Today, shortly after that, that was in September 2020, is when I launched my business, my garden space, which is a therapeutic gardening service. I now have my participants range from basically ages 5 to 93, from quite a large diverse background, lots of cultural backgrounds, that numerous support needs, from working with kids with autism and attention deficit disorder through to supporting people with significant mental health issues and working with older Australians living with dementia. I practice within people's homes, so individually, which provides me opportunities to support carers, sometimes even provide therapeutic, gardening with carers too, which it gives them a form of respite for themselves and something that they can use for their own well-being, to nurture their well-being. I support our gardeners to go out into the community to engage with others, so giving them the confidence to do that. And I'm also now providing some support in schools, both individually and in group sessions, to promote social skills development. Okay, so I would say one of the first problems that I encountered was actually articulating what I did. I remember when I was trying to get my head around what is this concept of therapeutic horticulture, I was sitting down with a group of friends and realised that and I'd said to them, I want to do horticultural therapy. And they said, what, you want to give cannabis to your clients? I went, no. So they were having a little bit of a laugh about it, and I realised that maybe I needed to be a bit more specific about what it actually entails. COVID certainly helped, I think. Again, many of us would have experienced. It helped a lot of people identify the therapeutic benefits of garden. We've all heard the stories of people doing that. I've even seen, in Australia in our own gardening programs, lots of therapeutic gardening being highlighted and how people have benefited and healed from engaging in gardening. In Australia, of course, it's not recognised in mainstream in the same way as things like animal-assisted therapy, art therapy and music therapy are. Our core funding, well, for myself, the core funding I receive is through the National Disability Insurance Scheme and also My Aged Care. So they're both particular funding packages provided to individuals to support them in maintaining their independence, promoting their well-being and their engagement in the community. So it was really important. That's Commonwealth funding. It was important to be able to say, this is what I do. This is something that's actually beneficial. It's actually, it is actually a evidence-based therapeutic approach, and to be able to demonstrate that these are the outcomes, these are the positive outcomes that we've experienced in working, with this method. Primarily, what's ended up happening is that I promote myself. When I'm, approaching providers and providing that support, I present myself as a qualified social worker. So I draw on those 25 years experience. That's the allied health professional background that I come with, and as a qualified horticulturist. And people seem to understand that. Mainly my participants and, the schools and settings that I work in refer to me as the garden therapist. There's the garden therapist. And really that makes it very easy. It's not scientific. It basically just says that's what we're doing. So that is what we do. In starting providing my programs, I think the first challenge for myself, because I'm the kind of person that just wants to do it. I just want to get in there, just go in there, get my hands dirty, but realise that I had an obligation in many ways. If the purpose of what I'm doing is to provide therapy and meet treatment goals, I really needed to know what were my clients' needs, what were participants' needs, what were the goals that they wanted to achieve, and what were the best ways that we could support them in meeting those goals. So I had a clinical social worker come alongside me and help me develop some of my assessment tools. And I have to say that I instantly saw the benefit of that. I think it assisted me in understanding needs. It helped me to inform and develop the treatment plans, to manage the risk, both for the individual, but obviously gardening in itself has some inherent risks that we need to be mindful of, and the opportunity to evaluate outcomes. In my practice, the benefits of that have been, it's enhanced my practice. So when I've been able to gather a good background, a good historical background, for example, working with dementia clients, I'm able to say to them, or to use their stories in my work as a way to draw them out and to engage in therapy. I even did that today with one of an Italian lady and talking about her hometown, and just the way her eyes would light up when she's speaking about her hometown was fantastic, and certainly enhanced her well-being. It assists in developing a cohesive and consistent care plan. So you're drawing information from other healthcare providers, other allied health providers and professionals. And again, if you're able to demonstrate that what we do has value and worth and good outcomes, it is able to ensure that you receive ongoing funding in order to provide what you do and to be able to provide more of your services to others as well. The next thing was, certainly I felt like and was viewed by people and myself and by people in my world and other professions as a pioneer in the field. That's what people were saying. It must be tricky as a pioneer in the field. And I guess in one way I felt like that. I felt a bit isolated until I became a part of Therapeutic Horticulture Australia and realised, no, I'm not a pioneer in the field. Therapeutic horticulture has been going on for ages, and there have been many people that have been doing this for a long time. And as we know, even using community gardens to engage people in schools, that are having difficulty with school engagement, for example, it's been going on for decades. Part of this process is raising awareness about what therapeutic horticulture is and how it's been utilised. So this has enabled me to meet other practitioners, other people wanting to develop their practice. We're able to bounce ideas off each other. There's some great opportunities for mentoring and skill sharing as well. The other thing that I was able to do is receive ongoing supervision by an eco-psychologist. So he really understood the research and background when it comes to using therapeutic approaches and merging those with nature and working with nature to provide good outcomes. I think, again, this is one that people can relate to, flexibility and adaptability. I think when I first started practicing, I certainly felt like I was doing cognitive yoga with every session because you had to adapt to, is the weather going to be good? How's my participant going to be feeling? What's the engagement process going to be like? And you just have to change and adapt according to what the needs are. And I think that that's kind of like an ongoing thing. I'm more comfortable with it now. I'm not so nervous, but initially it was almost a source of stress until I realised that's the nature of what we do. It's the nature of nature, really, isn't it? So my key tip I have found, and that's something I'm a big advocate for, is collaboration. I've greatly valued coming alongside occupational therapists, physiotherapists, speech therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and saying, what are you doing in this person's life and how can I support what you're doing in the garden space? And I've found that when we work together with similar therapeutic goals, we're not working counterproductively, we're working together to provide that cohesive, unified approach. It really enhances the benefits for the clients. And also, as a key point, I wanted to say that using a person-centered approach, it's about working with my clients to decide, what is it that they want to achieve, what's important to them, and also working with the carers who often feel like they're discarded in this planning process and even in building strategies because they have so much information, and being able to draw upon that and use that as part of my approach, I think has been really beneficial. So a couple of some highlights that became very evident for me when I started practicing. One was designing a garden with a lady who wanted to get back into her love of gardening. It involved laying down new turf for her at almost the peak heat of summer. So we laid down the turf. She was told by the expert, you need to water this garden at 7 o'clock every morning. Now, my participant had struggled to get up in the mornings. She was often a very late riser, but suddenly she's getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning every morning, and I'm checking in with her. How are you going? I hope it's not too much. And she said, no, it's been really good. Watering the garden helps me get out of my head, gives her a purpose and a meaning to wake up in the mornings. And I think that it was validated for her when the turf specialist returned and just said, look at your garden, it's amazing. How have you managed to make this so green? I've just come from another client who managed to burn their garden because they didn't water it. And her eyes just lit up at that feedback. So it was a really good way of reinforcing this kind of engagement process. The next one was working with a lady who had limited mobility, an older lady in a retirement village, was no longer able to engage directly in the garden, one of the classic things I do, and I'm sure others of you have also used this, is, you know, talking to the, referring to myself as an apprentice and being guided by the gardener that I garden with, and saying, you show me how to do it. You show me how you'd like to have this done. So rather than gardening for them, I'm gardening with them. What she loved was bright pink flowers, just loved them. We'd go down to the nursery, she'd buy these beautiful flowers. Sometimes she'd already have purchased them and they'd be ready for me to plant. And I'd ask her the next week after we'd planted them, you know, how are you enjoying this? Because she could mainly only enjoy the garden from her window rather than being in the garden, because it wasn't safe for her to wander outside. But she'd say to me every morning, the flowers stand up and salute me. And it was her way of starting the day, and, you know, really helped to lift her mood and her outlook, literally. And this one,
Tanya, sorry, can I give you a 5-minute call, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, it's good timing. I'm just about wrapping up. So the final one was something that occurred just a couple of weeks ago. I had a couple of boys at a school who, I'm part of this school and seen as the garden therapist, and I had the assistant principal come up to me and said, you know, can you come alongside these two lads and help them out? We had one curled up in a ball in the classroom, one outside the classroom, and they came and joined me in the garden. And within 10 minutes, they were completely engaged in the process of getting their hands in the dirt and looking at the worms. They were calm. And I had one of the teacher's aides there, just, you know, observing the fact that these kids were literally gardening in the green zone. When we talk about regulation, the green zone is the space where people are calm and they're focused and they're ready to do the work. So, yeah, so I think I found it really great, and I'm looking forward to doing more of that. I've found it personally beneficial, my work with, therapeutic horticulture, and the engagement with THA. I'm really looking forward to helping others connect, to kind of continue to build up this community. I'm very passionate about networking and just really helping to lift the profile of therapeutic horticulture in Australia. So thank you very much. And I will now hand over to our lovely Tara. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Are you going to stop sharing screen for Tara, or is Tara just...
No, this is the final slide.
Okay.
So just, not that you can see me at the moment, still looking at beautiful Tanya, but that's okay. So taking therapeutic horticulture forward in Australia, we're looking to now really look at education pathways. There I am. Hello. Where the aim of Therapeutic Horticulture Australia now, and, you know, from the journey you've heard over this last hour, is that therapeutic horticulture needs our organisation to really look at education pathways, to offer accreditation to practitioners where they're meeting best practice. We're creating standards so that we can really regulate this profession and improve it, and ensure that practitioners out there are delivering a good level of program to their participants. We're working on a mentor program at the moment, which will work with those who are just coming into this area, and have them work alongside a established professional to learn about what they're doing. And also part of that is to lift their level of hours that are required as a part of their membership. Our full members require 120 hours of either paid or voluntary work experience alongside their degrees in allied health or horticulture, to be able to be an accredited therapeutic horticulturist, essentially. So that's something that we're working on. Other things moving forward is we're really, we want to keep this momentum going. And through that we need to be, like Tanya said, creating networking opportunities, offering educational webinars and seminars, and doing a lot of skill and knowledge sharing. As we find out, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We're not doing this in isolation, and so the way forward for therapeutic horticulture is to share our knowledge amongst each other for the better of the profession. So thank you for having us here today. I hope you've enjoyed the snapshot that we've given you of what's happening with therapeutic horticulture in Australia. It's a new and growing field, and there's so much more to do, and we're very excited about it. And as you can see from all three of us, we're very passionate. So I hope you've enjoyed this this seminar today, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Tara. That was really, I'm scribbling down here notes like nobody's business. I'm going to have to watch this whole presentation back, I think, at some future date. So much information, such a thorough and detailed presentation. Thank you so much, all three of you. That was brilliant. Some lovely comments in the chat. So I'm going to hand over now to Sharon, who will voice some questions for us. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thanks, Joan. And thank you. That was really interesting. So comprehensive. It was, yeah, very interesting. First question is from Herman, and it's THA consists only of volunteers, and can you handle that? Can volunteers just handle everything that you do, like webinars and training, etc., without any paid staff?
That is the challenge. That is the challenge. And that is something that, you know, as an organisation, we've really had to focus on in this, especially this last year. So there's so much we want to do. And from this strategic plan, the action plan is full of great stuff to do, but you've only got so many hours in a day. We all work. And so things like our admin support, our sort of back end business. One thing we really learnt, I guess, early on is, you can't be doing that and trying to do all these things. So we've outsourced that, and we pay an organisation to do that for us. What then that enabled us to do was create all these subcommittees, which you saw on the slide that I had up before. And within that, each of those subcommittees has a good 6 to 8 people on those subcommittees. So whilst national at the moment, our National Leadership Committee there's 14 of us on there. And then, each subcommittee having sort of about 6 or 8 people, we're starting to share the load. A year or two ago, it was just national and there were 8 of us, trying to do everything. And so with this momentum that has been building through, our conference series, at the webinars that we managed, that we did last year, I think we did 4 or 5 webinars last year. These kinds of events have really started to lift the profile and bring people, on board and bring passions out. And so more people are putting up their hands to share the load. So, at the moment this year, we're going quite well with delivering our projects from the action plan, but we're also mindful that you can only do so much. So we don't aim so high that you feel like you never achieve anything. We kind of broke our priorities into sort of 1, 2, and 3. And so, making sure that each subcommittee starts with their priority ones. And even if that's all that they did this year, I think there's generally about 4 or 5 of those, for each group. If that's all they do, then that's great. It means then next year they start on the next lot. And so we just space it out, because burnout of our leadership groups and what have you isn't a problem that we try to risk manage.
Do you have any plans for the future to maybe fundraise and have funding so that you're not so reliant on volunteers in the future?
We are looking to work with getting funding. We have sponsors, as you can see. Oh, where are they? Next to me here. They are great, and they do a lot, and they really help us to be able to start to look at outsourcing some more professional advice on things and professional support on things. As we grow and get more momentum and get more sponsorship on board, we're hoping to be able to potentially aim towards having paid leadership as such, which then frees us up to do the fun stuff. So yes, that is the vision going forward. You look at other organizations that have grown from something small to, you know, being a professional body, and all of their CEOs and everything, everyone's paid, because that's the way you get there to really be able to represent your profession.
Yeah. A question from Fiona. What are your ideas for bringing along the grassroots, like doing it my way, people who perhaps don't see the need for professional recognition?
I was going to see if anyone else was answering. I guess we don't see, well, let's just say, I think the idea is that we need to educate organisations about what is a acceptable level of profession that they should be employing if they're going to have a therapeutic horticulture program run for the people that they work with. So by developing an accreditation model, which we're sort of working through at the moment, the aim is for it to be recognised that to call yourself a therapeutic horticulturalist or horticultural therapist, you have to meet a certain standard, and that organisations will start, you know, as we educate and lift the profile, they'll start to demand that, especially through also linking through our mentor program. You know, we can't control everybody, essentially, and some people in the grassroots, you know, may not need to kind of step up, but the aim is to try and capture, especially those who are working in sort of the health levels and the, you know, education levels, and those that come in with degrees in other professions, to be able to show a standard of practice that is, you know, that is required.
Thank you. Was Tanya saying something, or was she just agreeing with all that?
Oh, I was going to add that, yeah, I agree with what Tara is saying, like, especially if what someone wants to describe the therapeutic horticulture side of things, we would like to see that, you know, qualified, meeting a standard of practice. I'm aware that there are ways of people who might love gardening but want to come alongside and garden with people purely for the companionship, for the social benefits of that. Through these funding packages, there are support worker rates available, so it's not as a therapeutic support, but as a side-by-side kind of companion support that could be an option there. But I again, because we're working with vulnerable people, it's really, I think it really is important to have a certain standard of practice that people adhere to, and there is a knowledge base that comes with that too. So even having some adequate supervision of people would even be, you know, I would certainly strongly recommend it.
Thanks. We're working on exactly those issues now.
Okay.
It's great to hear that. There's a lot we can learn from each other. Thank you.
Tanya, I have got a question for you specifically. It's about school involvement. And does Australia have an increasing educational focus on academic subjects? And does therapeutic horticulture offer a way to engage children who don't respond to this? Is it supported by the government or local authorities? Yes.
I think, again, you know, this is part of our own educating of the community in terms of how can, I know that I've seen some research that's been done within Australia about how we can bring more gardening and nature-based activities into the school space. There's certainly the area that I garden in one of the schools has has the STEAM component. There's a whole building that's assigned, and they have a garden assigned, so they're certainly incorporating gardening as part of education. I still think on the broader level, people are yet to see and understand just how we can work with kids that might not engage so well in the main school system, and how we can, you know, use gardening as a way to support them. Yeah, so I can't really speak for the education broadly because I'm not in that world. I'm coming into that world as a therapist, so I'm not so familiar. But I know that even when I'm at the different schools, I have people approaching me and going, well, you know, what is it that you're doing here? And, you know, so that's sort of the education in it at the moment.
Thanks. I think we're back to Tara again, maybe here. Is there a cost attached to being a member of Therapeutic Horticulture Australia?
Is there a course that you have to do?
yes, does it cost anything to be a member or to be involved?
This is actually a Tanya question. She's our membership convener. She can answer this one. You're muted.
Yes, there is a cost associated, and it depends on what level you're wanting to be a member. Full membership, as Tara has described, and on our website it actually outlines levels of experience qualifications that will depend on whether you can apply for full member or whether you can come and join us as an associate member or as a student member. And so those costs vary depending on what it is that you're seeking, with different associated benefits as well.
Okay, thanks. We've got another question here from Phoebe. Because there's no formal qualification in Australia yet, would you recommend people gain joint qualifications, say in diversional therapy and in horticulture, to prepare for a career in horticultural therapy?
That is the pathway that a lot of people take. Majority of, well, and Amy can qualify this, where people come from, they tend to come from either an allied health with a horticulture taste, or they come from a horticulture background of, certificates or diplomas or what have you, and then they go and learn about health. So there is always, especially as a full member, to be a full member, you have to have a degree, a university degree, or a high level diploma in one or the other. Mind you, though, it's not just practitioners. I'm a landscape architect, so I don't do what Tanya does. So for someone like myself, and even Amy, coming from the academic world, we're not there doing hands-on programs. I design therapeutic landscapes. So, as to become a full member for someone like myself, yes, I have my university degree, but then I have to show a certain number of hours, and I'm pretty sure it's about 120 hours of paid or voluntary work within therapeutic horticulture realm. And I mean, that can be like being part of Therapeutic Horticulture Australia, giving back through doing activities, or it's running education seminars, or running an organization like this. There are many ways that you can earn those hours, but it's the Therapeutic Horticulture is not just about people who are running programs. There are so many of us who come from different realms as well, and I think that's what makes it great, because we learn from each other. I, as a landscape architect, learn from the therapists to understand what it is that they need on the ground to facilitate their programs. That then informs my design, and I do a better job because I'm creating something that people can actually use, rather than me just assuming what they need. So us all sharing and working together, we inform each of our different professions in different ways and enhance them.
Thank you. Thanks. I think that's the end of the questions. There are a lot of very positive comments in the chat, which hopefully you'll get to see. But yes, I'd like to echo them. That was really interesting from our point of view. Very, very interesting presentation.
Well, thank you for having us. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. We've loved being here.
Thank you. Yeah, we've thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. I'm just having a quick look through to see if anybody's maybe popped their hands up. So we've got time for another question. If anybody does want to raise their hand, either unmute yourself and shout very loudly at me, or put your hand up in the reactions. No, everybody quite happy? Okay, great. Thank you so much.